So what is fragility then? And you mentioned sort of the resistance to the concept of fragility. And if we look out there, there's so many ways to interpret it and many working operational definitions from different institutions. But to you, what is fragility?
So this is a very interesting question because we never put our hands very precisely. There was a lot of attempt for an institution that is very quantitative, like all the development bank institution, the World Bank and others, to put a line. This country is fragile, this country is not fragile. And because there was more and more interest to put quite a lot of money in fragility to start to help those countries, we needed to put a line. We just could not be in between. But I was always from the point of view that even if you put a line, the approach should not be just defined for some country. You need to put a line because there are resources that you have to attribute, and you know what countries can get the resource and what countries cannot. But in terms of your approach, the process, you should not put a line. First of all, because there are countries that are going down into fragility. You can see it, but the indicators are not yet at a level that would allow to pass the threshold. But also because there are countries with regional fragility, so their national indicators are not bad, but some of their region are extremely fragile. So you had all those problems that were very complicated to define. I don't like the idea of a line of fragility, but then what is fragility? So fragility was first by the bank seen as a very governance issue, as I was mentioning. But the OECD slowly, where there was much more of freedom to think, because there was a lot of, at the OECD, there's a lot of bilateral government are represented of rich country. And some bilateral have actually much more freedom to think politically or in other ways than an institution like the World Bank or even than the UN. So they started to say, well, there's political issues in many of those countries. There are other type of issue. And what is very interesting is in 2015, the OECD, OECD was monitoring fragility and had a report on fragile state. In 2015, it's a very important conceptual change. They moved the title of their report from Fragile State Report to State of Fragility Report. Now, this means that there's not a fragile state and a non-fragile state. There are different states of fragility. And in the state of fragility, what you have is very different dimensions. So they had 5 big dimensions, right? The economic dimension, the security dimension, the environmental dimension, the human security dimension. So they had the societal dimension, the political dimension. They had 5 big dimensions. And inside those dimensions, they had a number of indicators. And they didn't want to have a list anymore of fragile countries. They were putting all their country and judging them along this list, which means that, along those indicators, which means that you had level of fragility and not anymore, which means that, of course, the bank had about 30 countries on their list. They had about 52, because you had a lot of countries that they were monitoring that were not there because they were very strong on one dimension, but not on another. So that's, I think, the way we started to think about fragility. And fragility in some ways is like, if you're depressed as a person, you're depressed and you feel that things are not going, that you're not managing to get things straightened out. And you have countries that are collectively in this type of situation. And they don't always know what's the cause, as we don't always know what's the real cause of our depression. And those countries have problems that might be at level of the cohesion, at the level of the politics, at the level of corruption, but they are different elements. And those elements tend very often to reinforce each other.